Thanks, Bully. So good morning, everybody, and welcome. As you all know, inspirational graduation speeches are usually made by people like Steve Jobs or Beyoncé, who have lived a full and glorious life. They are there to impart their wisdom to the youth who are about to set out on a new chapter in their lives. Unfortunately, I'm no Steve Jobs or Beyoncé, but I've been inspired by a topic that is so relevant to us all, yet most of us are not even conscious of it. So this morning, I want to share my thoughts and findings with you all about the influence of social norms. We are all familiar with the notion that everyone should go to university after matric, study something mainstream, get a good job, get married, buy a house, and have children. However, when we disrupt the system and don't follow these norms, society just doesn't understand it. The problem is that we've grown up in a society where confining ourselves to the traditional expectations of success is easier and something we don't have to put deep thought into. So we avoid disrupting the system and we just go with it. At the tender age of 9, I already had plans as to what I wanted to be one day. From my upbringing, I was only familiar with professions that we learnt about in class or that I heard of in storybooks. Throughout my early years, I went through stages of wanting to be a dolphin instructor, a baker, and a preschool teacher. But as I got older, this all slipped away. The professions I started to hear about changed. Subjects like art and drama were just lessons that gave us a break from working in the day. Maths, science, and English were the subjects that really had to matter. When high school came along and we had to make subject choices, triple science or double science and accounting were goals. I remember getting my subject choice list and feeling completely overwhelmed. I was never really good at science, but by choosing science as a subject, I felt so accepted by my peers. I was told time and time again that by taking science as a subject, it would open every single door to the working world, so I just went with it. So considering the fact that I never enjoyed or wasn't really good at the subject to begin with, I'm sure you can all imagine the outcome. Yep, that's right. 3 months in, and my marks gave me no other option but to drop the subject. After interviewing 100 respondents in their early 20s, I realized that I'm in actual fact not the only person that's been led to disappointment by these expectations within schooling systems. Only 22% of my respondents said that they selected their school subjects without the influence of anyone else. Reflecting on their school days, 56% said if they could replay the cards, they would have chosen their subjects differently. Surprisingly, this pattern continued through to varsity, where half of my respondents said that someone else had a part to play in their degree. It's surprising that despite most respondents being let down by the choices that they made at school, so many then still went on to rely on others to help them choose their career paths. The truth is that we all just want to be reassured that everyone else is on board with our decisions and that we're doing the right thing. So what are these mainstream professions that every high school kid chases? Well, mainstream is defined as something that is considered customary or acceptable by the majority of people. In South Africa, we consider these mainstream professions to be lawyers, engineers, accountants, commercial farmers, and doctors. But what about those individuals who are completely uninterested, incapable, or can't afford to take the mainstream route? So I've got a little story to share with you. A year ago, my brother went for his high school interview. One of the questions he was asked was, "What does your dad do?" Firstly, I didn't really understand the relevance of this question, considering the point of the interview was to assess my brother's capability of fitting into the school. But nonetheless, my brother's answer to the question was that my dad is a farmer. Now, my dad is in actual fact an electrician and has been for the past 26 years. He just so happens to have 10 cows as a sideline interest of his, but he is most definitely not a farmer. So what caused my 12-year-old brother to give this false, impulsive answer? Well, the truth is that my brother felt like this question was judging his family's appearance and status. All his friends' parents have mainstream careers, and he felt like his family didn't quite meet the private school norm. Throughout my brother's years, much like ours, different societal factors have shaped his beliefs about what careers make you successful and which ones don't. This is just a practical example of the negative influence of this. My dad and his two brothers are very knowledgeable in their fields of work. As I said before, my dad is an electrician, his older brother is a tiler, and his younger brother is a plumber. They all started at the bottom, learned through their trades, and have now been able to successfully start their own businesses. But times have changed, and we don't see our friends taking these practical routes anymore. We would rather fail and keep pursuing something that we hear makes others wealthy, even if we aren't passionate about it. We overlook the idea of going into less mainstream industries that our country desperately relies on because we can't guarantee that it will bring us immediate financial gratification. With the influence of modern social norms, we've been left with what Paul Krugman describes as a hole in the middle. His column in the New York Times speaks about how high and low wage employment have grown rapidly, but medium wage jobs have lagged behind. A reason for this is that the youth that would usually make up the medium wage earning workforce are choosing to embark on mainstream paths, even at the expense of their unhappiness and failure. The truth is that society is always going to need plumbers, electricians, and other blue-collar workers. But they aren't getting the respect and value they deserve because they aren't the glamorous, socially acceptable jobs that offer us the lifestyle we see on social media. Even though these jobs are the jobs that offer job security because they are the type that are hard to automate, we are still willing to cut our losses and follow the norm. From my pool of respondents that are currently working and no longer studying, 50% said that they're not even working in the same field as their studies. Now, there's nothing wrong with finding your passions later on in life, but imagine if we found them earlier. Perhaps all these influences from our early school years and varsity years are what's truly holding us back. Our dreams and passions from our childhood all get washed away during adolescence, and we embark on a journey of living a life led by society. I was inspired by Steve Jobs' commencement speech. Jobs dropped out of college because he wasn't enjoying what he was doing. But for 18 months, while he was a dropout, he sat in on classes that interested him, like calligraphy. As we all know, calligraphy actually ended up being a major contribution to the Macintosh typeface. Jobs, too, was faced with many of the social pressures that most of us have been faced with, and his decision to drop out was by no means an easy one. However, had Jobs not made that decision, Mac would probably not be where it is today. Now, I'm not saying that we all need to be the next Steve Jobs, but by simply making small changes, like choosing the subjects that we actually enjoy and finding jobs and hobbies that fulfill our passions, we too can be successful. There's no measure to success, it's just simply being fulfilled with your life in whichever way that might be. While analyzing my results, I was saddened by the 47% of respondents that said that they were currently unhappy with what they are doing. Societal norms will always exist. However, we are so privileged to have grown up in a society where we do in actual fact have the freedom to make our own decisions. We just make ourselves susceptible to being influenced. I read an article 2 weeks ago about the Korean Sonong, and I was horrified. The Sonong is an 8-hour marathon of back-to-back exams, like our matric exams, except they're all in one day. These exams dictate whether students will go to university, what jobs they'll get, where they'll live, and even what relationships they'll have. So basically, their fate and status in society is all summed up in these 8 hours. After reading this article, it is no surprise that suicide is the leading cause of death among Korean youth. We so often just take our circumstances for granted. With all this being said, there is hope. The future of our youth is actually looking promising because we're moving into an age where we have the confidence to make our own decisions. I still think one of our country's greatest success stories is Trevor Noah and what he stands for. He's successful because he's always remained true to himself, he's not fazed about what everyone else is doing, and he doesn't take anything too seriously, and people love him for that. Another factor that contributed to success is that he's always had one strong person in his life that always believed in him. In his autobiography, he said that it was his mum who taught him how to be a man and how to stay resilient when everything felt like it was falling apart. My favorite quote in his book is when his mom, Patricia, says to him, "Trevor, a man is not determined by how much he earns." And then she goes on to say, "A man is not what you have, but it's who you are." I think that he is so lovable and relatable, not to only South Africans, but to people all around the world, because he knows who he is and what he values. So this morning, I want to encourage you to all forget about what everyone else thinks and challenge yourself to find your carrots in life without letting anything steer you away from them. Your carrots might not come to you immediately, but the more you put yourself out into the world, the sooner you'll find these passions. As Steve Jobs says, your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by the results of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of other opinions drown out your inner voice. And most importantly, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. Thank you.